Today, as I'm recording this, it is World Earth Day, and I decided that was a perfect opportunity to break out a retro review for a boot that I really think should be the future of football boots, and also take a look back at, let's call it, some Boot Wizard milestones and a boot that is really important to this channel. What's up guys, I'm James and welcome to Boot Wizard. We are of course looking at the GS360 today. We're going to do a retro review. And the reason that this boot is so important to me, to this channel, is because this was the first ever Boot Wizard video to go up. I reviewed the Nike GS360. So this is a very important boot for that reason. It's a very important boot to me because of what it stands for, and I think it's potentially a very important boot for the whole boot industry moving forwards, and we need to take some cues from this, and it's perfect to look at that on World Earth Day. Remember to like and share the video, get subscribed, pledge over at Patreon if you can, and let's retro review the Nike GS360. So for anyone that's not aware, this is the third gen of the Nike GS line. The GS line started in 2012 with the Nike GS. It's the same colorways as this and features a lot of the same design cues, so that's why this looks like this. The GS2 was released later, 2012, featuring a white and black upper with some iconic safari print, and also Nike really wanted you to know that this boot had ACC, the first boot to feature that on the upper. Other than colours and ACC, there's no difference between the GS1 and the GS2, which is kind of a shame because the GS1 was basically unwearable and therefore so is the GS2. It's a fantastic concept. The whole GS line means green speed, and the whole idea is to produce environmentally sustainable products either by upcycling, recycling, or creating as minimal waste as possible. That original GS line had a sole plate made out of castor beans. It was some fantastic technology that's got into it, and that is what brings us to the GS360, a 2018 iteration of the GS line designed to give us less waste, more recycled materials, and a more sustainable football boot. So in tech terms, this is completely different from the 2012 versions, and as I say, that's a good thing. This has a circle knit upper, which you might be a lot more familiar with now than you were when this released, because it's what features on the Nike Mercurial Pro takedown models, and it is a fantastic material. And the reason that they've used circle knit is because it produces less waste. It can actually be manufactured in this way while producing zero waste. Similar to the feeling you get from the Superfly 7 Pro and the Vapor 13 Pro, the circle knit material isn't quite as responsive. There's not as much structure built into it, especially when you compare it to the current Elite models with that high tenacity yarn built in and the two different types of fly knit material. So what that means is that there is a thicker liner that runs on the inside, which does take away from some of the super barefoot touch. But don't get me wrong, this is still very close to the ball. It still gives you a very sharp touch on the ball. It's just not Vapor 13 sharp. It's not Vapor 13 responsive by any means, and it's also not Vapor 13 locked in. And we can compare it more closely, especially in upper terms, to what came along with the pro level models this time round. And honestly, I would take this over both of the pro level models. While the boot does have that internal liner to provide some structure, there is very little in the way of coating on the outside of the boot, which keeps the boot nice and soft, nice and flexible, and gives you a really nice and close wrap around your foot. Most of the coating that runs around the boot is not anything structural. It's purely there for the sake of looks, to look like that original GS, and with so much of that knit exposed through this one-piece upper, you would want to be careful using these in adverse weather. So I really like this boot. I think this is a fantastic colorway. I love Volt. Volt and black is an amazing color. The split on the toe looks fantastic. The fact that it just replicates the iconic look of that original GS so well in a modern silhouette, I think is absolutely fantastic. It even has, so all of these kind of shiny black lines here that run around, they all replicate what was on that original GS boot, which is fantastic. Has the ACC logo, not as big as on the GS2, the little Nike tick. No Safari on this one, it's much more GS1 than GS2, although they've even gone as far as to make the back heel area here, so this, it's an internal heel counter, but this area that looks like the external heel counter, they've made this in the same kind of matte black that's not kind of jet black, it's a bit of a grey. They've made it look exactly the same as you got on those original GS models. It's fantastic. The attention to detail is great, and this is one of my favorite looking boots, if not my favorite looking boot from the year it was released. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but the laces are 100% recycled, and so is the insole. So the foam on the back of the insole, which I will now get out, had this issue in the original review. The foam on the back here, this is all 100% recycled material as well. So you still get a split sole on this, but the stud housings, the stud pattern are completely different from what you get on the current generation of Mercurials and the generation that were around when this was released in 2018. You can see here that you get this kind of circular push-off zone on the front, which is a little reminiscent of what you got on the Superfly 4 and a tiny bit like the small area that's on the Vision at the moment. You then get these three-way style studs in here, which are great for kind of giving you better rotational or multi-directional movement, shall we say. The current Vapor lineup, the current Mercurial lineup, is very focused on aggressive straight line speed, and it does that better than this. But this is definitely more flexible and gives you a freer, more natural feeling, and that applies to the actual sole plate itself as well, because it's simply not as stiff. You definitely get more flex in the forefoot, and you get a little bit more through the midfoot as well, but not so much that it becomes unstable. It's definitely still a stable, locked in, and responsive feeling boot, despite not having the most responsive upper. Okay, wait, let's get these on the scales compared to the current Vapor. So this is the Vapor 13 Elite, and that comes in at 193 grams, which is a very good weight for a modern day speed boot. It's around the lightest boots on the market at the moment. And then the GS360, 190 grams, so it's actually lighter than the current Vapor, albeit not by a huge amount, and you're not going to notice the difference on feet, but it's lighter. Value for money wise, when this came out, this was incredible value. As I say, there are some elements here that were used that made the construction cheaper, but it's a limited edition boot. There was only 2,018 pairs of these boots made. My pair is 1,103. And they were 155 British pounds to buy, which is so much cheaper than all of the current Mercurial range. It's crazy, and yeah, okay, so the build was a little bit cheaper, but to get a limited edition boot for that kind of money, never mind one in what is an iconic and collectible GS line, was amazing. If you want to pick up a pair of these now, of course they're limited edition, so it's very difficult to do. We do occasionally see a pair come around. These were also available with Nike ID, so you could make a Nike ID pair. They weren't limited edition, but there's a variety of them around. So £155 to buy it brand new. They've definitely held their value at that if you can pick up a new pair. So anywhere between 150 and 250 pounds is what I've generally seen these going for, which isn't excessively expensive, especially if you are picking up the limited edition pair. A used pair, their value does seem to drop, and they do seem to go for below retail. So my pair are used, even with the box and the bag, which I still have. I would imagine that these would sell for under the amount that I originally paid for them, that £155. So aside from the looks, the sustainable materials, the weight, and the value for money, on feet is where these really come alive for me. Where the older generations were basically unwearable, these are exactly the opposite. That circle knit upper being basically completely uncoated and super soft leads to a very personal fit. It molds around your foot and it's good to go out of the box, and it's really one of the most comfortable speed boots that I've ever had on my feet. I think this is more comfortable than what you're going to get from the Mercurial line at the time or the current Mercurial line. It is that good. Now, as I say, you sacrifice a little lockdown and responsiveness because of that, but if comfort's your game and you still want a speed boot with that speed boot-like touch and feel on the ball, then this is definitely worth checking out if you can get it. That transfers over to the sole plate as well. Being less aggressive, being less stiff, it does feel more fluid, more natural when it's on your feet and when you're running, which all leads to increased comfort. Yes, less aggressive, but more flexible and more comfortable. In the size, I went for my regular size UK8. Lengthwise, fits me perfectly. Widthwise, exactly the same, although it's not a boot that I particularly recommend for anybody who has wide feet. It's a narrow last, it's a narrow sole plate, and if you do have very wide feet, this boot is simply not going to be for you. Although I know that a lot of people who are buying and who have these aren't exactly doing so to wear them. They're a lovely little shelf piece. Mine go out on the pitch. Hashtag wear your boots. So what Nike have done here is they've made a boot that has very high levels of sustainability, of recycled materials, and they've put it out on the market for an affordable price. And this is something we need to see more of. Nike made this in 2018, and we've not really seen much in the way of other companies stepping up and moving forwards with this. We've seen it in football shirts with a lot of recycled plastic, especially from Adidas and Nike with their third shirts, but the sustainable recycled football boot hasn't really taken off. And a lot of that is down to cost. Even though this was affordable, Nike aren't making a huge profit off a limited run like this. So, do companies, especially the big ones, need to consider taking a bigger financial hit and a bigger financial risk on putting out products that are going to be friendlier to our environment? We all know the situation that we're in as a planet. We need to work together, and the big companies are a huge part of that. We go out and we buy these products. We are the consumers, and they need to provide products that really do hit that sustainable, environmentally friendly button, especially in 2020. Puma have recently done it with a couple of clothing lines with collaborations, and it's good to see that moving forwards. But the technology is already here with much of this Nike boot. Could they have gone further? Absolutely. The original GS and GS2s had more kind of inventive ways of coming up with sustainable and recycled ways of creating the football boot. The caster bean outsole, for example. And they've kind of stepped back here while increasing performance, which is great, but we need to see consistent innovation. I'd love to see a Nike GS line, a Nike GS boot, come out every 12 or 18 months, each generation showing a step forwards in what Nike have done to produce a sustainable football boot. And hopefully, and eventually, that boot will be the one that is the top of the market. The elite level boot will be the sustainable boot, but it's up to Nike to take the next step and to actually give these products, have them on sale. If the product isn't available, we can't buy it to show demand. So Nike have to take the next steps in helping us out and helping the planet out as a whole. Let me know what you think of the Nike GS360 down in the comments. Do you like the looks? Would you go out and cop a pair if you could? Do you feel like companies are doing enough for environmental sustainability, or should they be doing more? Of course, get subscribed to the channel if you do want to pick up more of my retro reviews, as well as those brand new boots when they drop. I post 3 times a week. But that's all from me here at Boot Wizard today. Happy Earth Day. We'll see you soon.